Hello and welcome, fellow lifelong learners. Thanks for joining me for One More Thing, a radio show all about cultivating our most valuable asset, our mind, and fostering a sense of curiosity to learn one more thing. We feature passionate practitioners and seasoned experts in numerous areas of interest for lifelong learners of all ages. One More Thing is sponsored by Kiffin & Company, a corporate learning and talent development consulting firm, and I'm your host, Kiffin McCoy Albert, a certified professional in talent development, learning advocate, and your fellow lifelong learner. Welcome to the show. In college, I took a counseling psychology class with a beloved professor who believed in lots of experiential practice. One of my assignments was to record a series of mock counseling sessions with another student, with their permission, of course. My practice sessions were even more realistic because my friend and fellow student asked if she could talk to me about real life instead of a made-up story. I don't remember if that helped or hurt my grade, but it definitely makes me want to go back and listen to those recordings. Our professor, who I now realize was perhaps ahead of his time, maybe just right with the time, would listen to our recordings and give feedback on how well we listened to the mock client, reflected understanding back to them, and guided them to identify action steps versus just directing them in what they needed to do. I had completely forgotten about that assignment until preparing for my conversation with today's guest. I am so excited to welcome Cathleen Moore to the show today. Kathleen is an RN by degree, an educator somewhat by accident, and a practitioner of motivational interviewing for the past 12 years. In a previous role as Director of Clinical Education, she was able to bring the concept of motivational interviewing, MI, to a group of community health workers who worked daily with high-risk patients. I'm excited to chat with her today so that we can learn a little bit more about MI and how it's used both personally and professionally. Kathleen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Kiffin.
Well, let's start off with just simply, what is motivational interviewing?
Sure. So motivational interviewing started many years ago, back in the 70s by two doctors. And they founded motivational interviewing really in the addiction space. And so using it to help folks internally find the why they would want to make a change. And so one of the things that I think is really neat is it is an evidence-based type of communication style that has been study after study after study after study to show the success. And so then starting in the late 70s, the early 80s, it has been translated into working with police departments, social workers, education, in health behavior change, clinical, which is my area of expertise being an RN. And so leadership, they have found that the skill set translates to so many different professions and continues to get the same results.
Oh, interesting. I think I read too that it's about not only, so the motivation for change certainly is a huge piece, but also getting to the capacity or capability of change. Is that the right wording?
Yeah, really close. And that's something else that I really love is the original book. The book that William Miller and Stephen Rolnick produced was back in the 80s. And the newest edition just came out last year, and they changed the actual definition of motivational interviewing. So I wanted to read you the newest one, which is motivational interviewing is a particular way of talking with people about change and growth to strengthen their own motivation and commitment.
Oh, okay. So commitment. Gotcha.
Yes. And I like to, in a nutshell, when I talk about motivational interviewing, I always like to tell people to make a change, it has to be important to you, and you have to feel confident in making that change.
I think we talked about one, and definitely correct me if I'm wrong here, about a patient who you were having trouble walking and needed to exercise more. And so there was a conversation around, well, just walk to your, then to your sidewalk today. And then, for a few days, and then walk to your mailbox and all that. And so there were these incremental milestones that they could work toward, but they still weren't doing it until I believe this was a community health worker that was talking with them about it. And ultimately what they determined is the reason that they even started this is that they really wanted to be able to walk on their own to go to a grandchild's graduation. I believe that's the story. Am I getting it correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's an acronym that is used in MI. So I'll use MI for motivational interviewing, not myocardial infarction, as some of the nurses that may be listening would think. But the acronym is DARN CAT. And the DARN stands for desire, ability, reasons, needs. And then the CAT stands for commitment, activation, and can't think of what the T stands for. I'll come back to that. Long story short, we have to know why it is that we're doing something. So for that particular patient, the community health worker was cheerleading. You can do it. You can do it. You can do a little bit more. You can do a little bit more. But until they got down to the R, the reason, and then the need to be able to continue to see and spend time with that grandchild, that's when it starts to set in internally about why you're doing something.
That makes sense. Well, how did you even find out about and get interested in motivational interviewing?
I had started at a company that did telephonic disease management. So a group that worked with some of the most vulnerable patients, but in the early stages. So COPD, CHF, congestive heart failure, diabetes. And the way that the nurses would communicate to the patients is to try to do education on what some of those behaviors were that they could do, like self-management, medication management, exercise, etc. However, when I talk to patients, or actually when I go into groups, one of my favorite things to do is to say, all right, guys, everyone in this room, raise your hand if you know you're supposed to floss at least daily, but twice a day. And everybody in the room raises their hand. And I'll say, raise your hand if you know that you're supposed to eat 5 to 7 varied fruits and vegetables every day. And everyone in the room will raise their hand. And then I'll say, how many of you eat 5 to 7 fruits and vegetables and floss your teeth at least once, if not twice a day? And there's always that 1 or 2 people that raise their hands. Love it. Love seeing the dedication. However, most of us don't, which tells us that education alone does not necessarily affect behavior change. And so my group of educators and leaders within the company, we attended a seminar by a woman named Susan Butterworth, who is one of the, not a founder, but definitely one of the early innovators when it came to motivational interviewing. And we did a online seminar that she did. And several of us liked it and got it. This is different. This is how people really change. And so then we signed up for a seminar in person by Bill Matulik, who has a really short book called How to Do Motivational Interviewing. And the interest grew. And so then I bought what people call the Bible of motivational interviewing, and it's the book that's written by William Miller and Stephen Rolnick. It is the big book, and I've read it from stem to stern so many times, and then just kept growing my knowledge. And so with my knowledge came buying more books, attending more seminars, listening to more podcasts, finding others who connected with it. And the more I learned about it, the more I saw the results, the more I started to utilize it, the more I started to see the results. And I am passionate. One of the reasons I went into healthcare was for proactive care instead of reactive care. And I had a coworker recently that just said, we want to provide healthcare, not sick care. And that is my passion, is providing healthcare. And with that comes motivational interviewing.
And for those who are just listening and not seeing our video, will you say the name of that book you just held up? I think I saw that it said 4th edition. So tell us what that book is.
Yeah, it's the 4th edition, Motivational Interviewing, Helping People Change and Grow. And it's written by the 2 founders of MI, William Miller and Stephen Rolnick.
Thank you. Well, I can hear the passion in your voice when you talk about it, which is wonderful, because anytime we have a passion for something, it helps us to delve deeper, gets to that motivation to learn more about it. And with the
Yeah.
show being all about lifelong learning, of course, I love that. One of the other questions I thought of is that when we hear of all of this, getting to the root of the motivation, the reason and all, obviously you've worked a lot in the workplace with community health workers and with patients, but how can we as just everyday folks, like, how does this impact our daily lives, or how could it impact our daily lives? Maybe the bottom line question is, why should just average individuals care about motivational interviewing?
Perfect question, which leads me to another acronym. Acronyms are big within MI, and that one is OARS. You'll always see the OARS on PowerPoint screens when folks are teaching, and
Like
that
boat
stands
wars.
the boat OARS. Yes, the
Yep.
boat OARS. It stands for open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and then summaries. And so one of the ways I love to see folks in their everyday world talking to their spouses, talking to their coworkers, talking to their kiddos, talking to a person that they met at the party. Two that really speak to me are reflections. So reflections, and then reflective listening, and open-ended questions. And I think we've all met someone at a party. I'll use that for an example. And we say, what is it that you do? And the person says, I work at the battery plant. We just had a battery plant open up close to me. We just opened up at the battery plant. Do you like it? Yes. How long have you worked there? 14 years.
Hard to make small talk with those 1 word or 2 word answers.
And I'm not really learning anything about that person. And so taking a step back and just flipping that conversation into, tell me more about what it is that you do. And then sitting back and listening to that answer. That sounds really interesting. What are some of the things that led you down that path? And with that also, I like to talk about golden silence. We as humans like to fill awkward pauses, and sometimes just being able to stop, smile, and listen lets that other person really open up and start to talk. The other part of reflection or reflective listening is, if we are truly listening to understand and not listening to respond, we have to actually listen. And when we listen, we start to hear things that we might not have otherwise heard. And just with that, with the open-ended questions, or that was really more open-ended questions, reflective listening. When you tell me something, I am able to, instead of just, and I can pair it, just give a real simple reflection back. Oh, okay, so you work at the battery plant. Or I could do something if you told me, yeah, I am pretty disappointed that I've been job searching, that I didn't get that job. And instead of saying, yeah, sounds like you're disappointed, I could say something like, and you're wondering what's next. And that's going to pull out more information. It gets down to the core of who we are.
Yeah, that's interesting. I recently read, I wish I could think of where I read it, but it said communicating is a learning journey. So I thought that, of course, obviously that appealed to me or resonated with me. But it also said to communicate is to perceive. And it went on and talked about, your first communication, it may even just be within your inner self, but the communication is also action. And it had several different like quotes, I guess, or whatever from different people. But then it also went on when it was talking about the tie to motivational interviewing, is that it asks, how do you talk about the change when you don't want to make that change? And then how do you listen and take the advice or take the counsel that you're given? That going into the conversation with an open mind and without expectation is all part of it. So I feel like with what you just said around listening and listening to comprehend and not listening to respond is part of that.
Absolutely agree with that. And part of When you know that you're talking with someone that in your mind, if you know that there needs to be a change made, that is about me. That's not about the person at all. And knowing that just having conversations about change, it's not magic. There is no magic formula. And so sometimes it is, if they're not wanting to make the change, it's weeks, it's months, it's a long time of listening, of doing the reflections, of trying to align and try to really get down to what they're feeling and why.
This all makes me just like spiral into thoughts, and I'm trying to rein it in here.
Maximize impact with tailored solutions by partnering with Kippen & Company. Developing your team is an investment, but it doesn't have to be just an expense. Discover more at kippenandcompany.com and start your journey to effective learning today.
What makes you enjoy, or why do you get so excited about teaching MI to others? I think in one case it's kind of obvious, but I feel like you could expound on that a little bit more.
One of the exercises that I've done, there's a workbook that Miller and Rolnick put together with exercises, and one of them is called A Taste of MI. And so it is not a role play, but a real play that you do and when you're teaching. And instead of kind of telling people what to do, it's asking the questions of why would you want to make the change? How could you go about making the change? And if you did, what might that look like? And so many times when I have been educating, teaching, doing classes on MI, you see that light bulb, literally that light bulb, the eyes open for people that they think they're doing some stupid exercise in a class. And once someone asks them those questions, you can see the change on their face. And when you see that, you know something works. And when you know it works, you start to see the possibility of, and I hate saying changing the world kind of one person at a time, but I truly believe in that this form of communication can help change each and every one of us 1 minute at a time.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. And you saying about the taste of MI, that's really neat, because then that indicates that it's kind of an door opener maybe to this concept, to this process. But I want to be clear too. So I, as just an average individual, I could Google and look up about MI. I could use some resources like the book that you said, and I think you're going to maybe give us a couple of other resources. And so we can really educate ourselves a lot on motivational interviewing. However, I think I understand that there is an organization there is formal certification around motivational interviewing. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, the big organization is called Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers. And so it really quickly, if you go down the path of learning more about MI, at one point it's going to take you to that website. And part of being a member of MINT, M-I-N-T, Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers, is being able to apply. And the application process is very, very rigorous. They're really looking for people to have 6, 7, 8 years of MI practice. And I did want to mention that really quick. MI is no different than playing a violin or playing the piano. It requires daily practice for years to become proficient at it. And there is a rubric, if you will, to go into how many reflections, how many are open-ended questions, simple reflections. And so there's scores associated with it. So it really is a lot of practice. And so this Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers, it's application-based. They only take so many people per year. If you are accepted into that, you then have to go to a further training, which is international 1 year, and then it's based in the US 1 year. So it's one time a year. Once you've completed that, you are considered a mentee or a member of Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers. Once you have that designation behind your name, it shows that not only have you made a true commitment in learning, but it also shows that you're going to have that continuing commitment to continuing education, learning, and then also sharing.
So this might be a little funny question, and feel free to be like, next. But it seems like that some people hearing this might say, well, okay, if we're getting to the motivation, I'm asking these questions, a kind of a snarky response might be, is this a way to manipulate people into doing what you want them to do? Do you see that or hear that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. And usually people say that when they don't truly understand that the questions that you're asking and the reflections that you're giving have nothing to do about what it is that you want. It has everything to do with what they want, why they want, what those reasons are behind it. And so they can try it. They can quickly try it, but you'll also quickly learn that it has nothing to do with manipulation of behavior. Trust me, I've tried it multiple times with my daughter and laundry. It doesn't work.
Yeah. With a husband and a teenage daughter, you have at home, you have plenty of subjects to try out.
Doesn't work. Everyone who's tried it on their spouses to clean the garage out, doesn't work.
Different motivation there.
Different motivation.
Yeah. Well, and that leads back to that patient that we were talking about with the mailbox. If that patient, I'm going to make up this patient here, but let's say that that as their nurse or their community health worker or their doctor, that they need to quit smoking, but they have zero desire, motivation, etc., to quit smoking. Then should you even still try to go down that path?
Yeah, it's a tricky question, which really makes me want to go down a whole different path of something that's not motivational interviewing, but it correlates when it comes to stages of change. Really, where are you? Are you a firm heck no, or are you I'm kind of wanting to think about it? And so motivational interviewing, the sweet spot is the people who are, kind of willing to think about it. However, even with the ones who are more the head in the sand or the hard no, you can still use the reflective listening. You can still use some of those skills around motivational interviewing with pros and cons. Hey, what would it look like if you were to quit smoking? And what might it look like if you don't? People believe what they hear themselves say. And so if we say, I'm a smoker, then you're a smoker. But when you start to say, I could get lung cancer and then die earlier than I want to, we start to believe what we hear ourselves say. And so some of it is just that repetition, and it's that person that continues to connect with you.
Gotcha. Yeah. So it sounds like we may have a whole nother topic to talk about stages of change.
Also a passion. I love talking about stages of change. And with that, let me say really quick, just because someone makes a change, so let's use smoking, and former smoker talking here, just because someone has made a change, it was important to me. I was confident that I could do it, and I did it. And now 4 years have passed, and I've got someone close to me that passes away. And I just started graduate school, and I'm really stressed out. There are other things in my life that might be more important to me, and I may be more confident that need to happen. And so that may be one that backtracks, that backslide. And so always keeping in mind that we're human, things happen, our lives change on a daily basis is also really important when it comes to thinking about change.
Really, the two things that just came out of that are, one, not everything is linear, right?
Exactly.
The back and forth, the round and circles, all that. But then also that all of these different things in our lives, motivational interviewing, stages of change, we could think of 10 more, are not siloed and all alone, that so many of these things are integrated and work together, and you can use stages of change within your motivational interviewing and vice versa and all that. So that's really a good point.
Yeah, it's a great way to say it. There are no silos. It'd be great if we were, if there were, but we're messy. Humans are messy.
Well, I know we are running out of time, and so I know that you've given us the book, written by the founders, as the resource, and you've mentioned Mint, the Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers, as a resource, that organization. Are there any other resources that you want to share?
There are so many resources on Amazon also that you can find on Mint, but a couple that I like to focus in on because of my nursing background. There is one called Motivational Interviewing in Healthcare. It's a really broad one that would really be applicable to even if you're a parent or someone in your family had a chronic condition. So very applicable broad stroke, but then
So
also
not necessarily just clinicians, but for even caregivers, family members. Okay.
exactly. However, if you're a nurse, there's one called Motivational Interviewing in Nursing Practice. It is specific getting into a clinician now talking to patients or family members. I've talked to my parents all the time. I'm not their nurse. Then there's a workbook too, called Building Motivational Skills, and it's one of the greatest ones if you're wanting to get more practice in. It has worksheets that you can do to where you have to get in and really stop and think to work your way through. So those are some of my favorites.
Okay, awesome. Well, and I know obviously if anybody has interest beyond reading on their own, then contacting Mint is probably the best way to go. If somebody wanted to contact you or find you, how is LinkedIn the best way for them to reach out to you?
All right. Yeah, and, LinkedIn would be great.
And you have your LinkedIn profile name. Is it just Cathleen Moore?
It's Cathleen Moore.
All right. So Cathleen with a C and Moore, Moore. That's Cathleen Moore. Well, thank you, Cathleen, so much for joining us today. I feel like we could talk, and what would have been great is we had time to do some role play practice. That would be fun.
I'd love
to see it in action.
Role play.
But unfortunately, that doesn't work for our show. But we really, really appreciate you coming on and teaching us a little bit about what motivational interviewing is, how it works, all that. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I've loved being with you today.
Okay, so you know the drill. Here's my tie back to workplace learning and development. The Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers, or MINT, says that MI is a guiding style of communication that sits between following or good listening and directing, giving information and advice, and that it is an approach to supporting people to make behavior changes where they may be ambivalent about the way forward. Kathleen also shared with us that although MI was established in the world of counseling, it's an evidence-based approach that has been found to be incredibly effective in various situations, and I think it applies to learning and development too. Motivational interviewing has 4 core skills: open-ended questions, affirmations, reflective listening, and summarizing. These can absolutely translate to the foundation of workplace learning, whether we are talking about content for learners or planning with executives. So we should all keep in mind that even if we are not trained in MI to the level of proficiency that we could be through MINT, employing these principles is still a great starting point for effective learning. I want to thank once again my guest Cathleen Moore for introducing us to motivational interviewing, and thank you to all of you for listening. And until next time, keep on learning. You've been listening to One More Thing, a radio show on the Power Me Up radio station on iHeartRadio. I'm your host, Kippen McCoy Albert. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to you tuning in next time as we continue cultivating your mind with one more thing.